Hey everyone, and tonight we're not marching to glory beside kings in shining armor. We're not diving into the mind of a brilliant strategist or a knight chasing honor. No, tonight we are being born. But not the kind of birth with doctors, clean sheets, or a crib waiting. No, tonight we're born on the dirt floor of a smoky hut, where our first victory isn't inheriting a kingdom, but simply surviving the first week. Forget towering castles, festive banquets, and maidens in silk dresses. Tonight we step into the real thing. Mud, superstition, hunger, back-breaking labor, and the ever-present shadow of a church bell dictating every second of your life. This is the true story of an ordinary man's life in the medieval era. And spoiler alert, it looks nothing like the fairy tales. This isn't the story of a day, but of an entire life. And of the life that came after. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm always fascinated to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe put on some wind or rain sounds to set the mood. And let's dive deep into tonight's journey together. You don't come into the world, you are ejected into it. And the world right now is a chaos of screams and sweat and the iron smell of blood. There is no sterile delivery room, no soft music, no doctor with comforting words. There is the dirt floor of your house, a handful of dirty straw that was changed last week or maybe the week before, and an older woman from the village whose hands are as calloused as her soul, and whose medical experience consists of having seen more people die than you will ever see live. Her mother, a panting silhouette in the dim light, isn't thinking about names or her bright future. She's in a primal battle, and victory is simply surviving the next contraction. Her father isn't in the room. He's outside, not because he's sensitive, but because childbirth is women's work. He paces in circles, kicking the occasional chicken, calculating. Not her future, but her usefulness. A son is another pair of hands to plow in a few years. A daughter, another mouth to feed until she can be traded for a modest dowry. If her mother dies, well, that's a disaster. Experienced labor is hard to replace. And then you are born. A wet, slippery hiccup of life. You are lifted not with tenderness, but with the practicality of a farmer inspecting a new calf. The old midwife gives you a hard slap. Not to celebrate, but to make sure your lungs are working. Your first cry is not a miracle. It is a diagnosis. It means you were not stillborn, which already puts you above two of your brothers who came before and never had that chance. Their names are whispered sometimes, like the wind, but you will never know them. They are just ghosts reminding you that existence is a privilege. Not a right. Your name for now is the baby, or maybe just him. Giving you a real name, a saint's name like Edric, is an emotional and spiritual investment, and your parents are cautious investors. The chances of you making it to your first birthday are at best 50%. A fever, a cough, a cold, diarrhea. The list of things that could wipe you out of existence is much longer than the list of things that could keep you in it. So they wait. They wrap you in a piece of rough wool and place you in a basket by the fire. Congratulations! You survived your birth. Now the real battle begins. Your world in the early years is the size of a single room. And forget about the charming cottages of fairy tales. Your home is a one-room biohazard with wattle and daub walls and a thatched roof that functions as a luxury condominium for rats, insects, and whatever else can climb up there. There are no windows, just an opening to let the smoke from the central fire out. The smoke, by the way, never completely escapes. It clings to everything. The walls, your clothes, your lungs. You will spend your entire life smelling vaguely of burnt wood and damp. The dirt floor is your playground. You learn to crawl on it. And your first solid meal probably includes a non-trivial amount of dirt. You share this space with your family and, depending on the season, with their most precious possessions, a goat or a few chickens, brought inside during the winter so they don't freeze or get stolen. You learn each animal's scent. You learn to stay out of their way. You learn that their body heat is as vital as fire. Your mother is a force of nature, always on the move but rarely looking at you. Her affection is shown not with hugs or kisses, but with a bowl of thin oatmeal she places in front of you. It's a gesture that says, "I fed you. Keep living." Your father is a more distant presence, a figure with a hunched back and hands that seem made of wood and earth. He speaks little. Orders are given with a grunt, approval with a silence that is less tense than usual. By the age of 4, you already understand the language of fear. There is the fear of the dark outside, where the forest whispers and the wolves howl. There is the fear of hunger, a hollow ache in the belly that is a regular visitor in late winter. And there is the fear of God, or more precisely, the priest. The priest is an otherworldly figure. He wears unusual clothes, smells of incense and sweat, and speaks a magical and frightening language called Latin. He speaks not of a god of love, but of a god of rules and punishments. Hell is not a theological concept. It is a real, vivid place, painted on the church wall with demons who look a lot like your annoying neighbor. You learn to bow your head and be silent when he passes by. His church bell is God's wristwatch, and everyone in the village dances to its tune. It rings to wake you up, to pray, to work, to warn of a fire, to announce a death. The shadow of the bell stretches over every moment of your life. At the age of 5, your childhood of relative uselessness ends. You get your first job. It's not a chore, it's a function. Your job is to be a human scarecrow. You spend your days in the newly sown fields, shouting and waving your arms to scare away the crows. It's mind-numbingly monotonous work in the sun or the rain, with your only company being the very birds you've learned to hate. Other jobs follow, gathering firewood at the edge of the forest, never venturing too deep, fetching water from the village well with a bucket that seems to weigh more than you, tending the pigs. There's no pocket money. Your reward is the right to eat the stale black bread at the end of the day. It is during one of these tasks that you see him for the first time. The Lord's son. He is your age, maybe 6, but he looks nothing like you or any child you know. First, he is clean. Shockingly clean, almost supernatural. Second, he wears shoes. Leather. Third, he is riding a pony, not working, but riding. For fun. He passes you coming from the stone castle on top of the hill, a place you only see from a distance, as if it were in the sky. He does not look at you. To him, you are part of the landscape, indistinguishable from a bush or a tree stump. You don't think in terms of social injustice or class inequality. Those are words from a future you can't even imagine. But in that moment, you learn a fundamental unspoken truth. The world is divided into two kinds of people: those who ride ponies and those who scare crows. And you know, with a cold, heavy certainty for a 6-year-old, which side you're on. His days are measured not in hours, but in tasks. His mind is filled not with dreams, but with practical concerns. Not tripping over the bucket of water, finding enough dry wood, avoiding the gaze of the Lord's overseer, a man with a broken nose and unblinking eyes. And then the day arrives. Your 7th birthday. There is no cake, there are no presents. The only thing that marks the occasion is the change in the way your father looks at you. No longer as a child who needs to be supervised, but as an incomplete worker. From now on, you will join him in the fields, not to scare away birds, but to learn to plow, to sow, to harvest, to work like a man. The church bell rings, marking the end of the day. For most of the village, it is a call to rest. For you, it sounds different. It sounds like a sentence. Congratulations. You survived childhood. Your reward is a lifetime of servitude. Welcome to the rest of your life. Your first day in the fields as a man is a revelation. Not the spiritual kind. It's a revelation of pain. Your father doesn't give you an inspiring speech about the legacy of the land or the nobility of work. He hands you a hoe, points to a row of weeds that seems to stretch to the end of the world, and utters a grunt that you interpret as begin. And you do. By the end of the day, your hands are raw. Your shoulders scream a protest in a language you didn't know, but now understand fluently. You collapsed onto your straw mat, not to sleep, but to slip into an exhaustion-induced coma. No one asked you how your day was. The question would be absurd. It was the day. You worked. You survived. That's the only assessment that matters. The next day you wake up and do it all over again. Your hands bleed, then blister, then callus. Those calluses are your diploma. They prove that you are useful. Your life is no longer ruled by the sun and moon. It is a slave to a much more ruthless tyrant, the agricultural calendar. The seasons are not things you look at through a window. They are your masters of ceremonies in hell. A spring. It comes not as a promise of flowers, but as the smell of cold mud and the crushing weight of the plow. You don't learn to plow, you become part of the plow. You and your father take turns guiding the heavy wooden blade, barely reinforced with iron, through the compacted earth, while a thin, melancholy ox pulls ahead. The ox, you notice, has the same look in his eyes as your father. It's a job that demands every ounce of your strength. You push with your shoulders, your boots sinking into the mud, the sweat running down your eyes, the constant scream in your muscles. After the plowing comes the sowing. You walk back and forth, with a bag of seed, tossing the grains with a practiced motion, praying that the birds won't eat them all before they've even sprouted. Each seed is a bet against the coming winter's famine. The summer is a trial by fire. The sun beats down on you without mercy. The work is weeding, a never-ending war against the weeds that threaten to choke your meager harvest. But the real test is corvée. This is a brilliant concept, invented by people who don't work. For several days each month, you don't work on your little strip of land, the land that keeps you alive. You work in the Lord's fields. His fields are vast, well-watered, everyone's priority. You weed his wheat, you harvest his hay, you mend his fences, all for free. Meanwhile, you can see, in the distance, the weeds growing on your own land. It's a daily lesson in helplessness. The system is called feudalism. It means that you are allowed to work to survive, in exchange for the privilege of working for free so that someone else can prosper. It is, you think with the sarcasm you would never dare express, a very fair system. The autumn, it's panic. It's harvest. A frantic race against the first frost or the rain that could rot everything. You work from dawn to dusk, bent over, brandishing a scythe that feels like an extension of your aching arm. The movement is repetitive, hypnotic. Cut, join, tie, cut, join, tie. Your fingers go numb. Your back becomes a single solid rock of pain. Dropping a sheaf is a sin. Losing grain is a crime against your very survival. When everything is finally harvested, the moment of truth comes. The Lord's overseer, a man whose smile never reaches his eyes, comes to oversee the division. He walks through your pile of grain, takes the best part for the Lord's barn, and leaves the rest for you. What's left has to last a whole year, to feed you, your parents, and pay tithes to the church. You learn to do math in your head, the math of despair, and the winter. Winter is the great enemy. It is a season of darkness, cold, and hunger. Work moves inward. You mend tools, weave rough baskets, thresh grain on the floor of the hut until your arms feel like they will fall off. The days are short, the night's an abyss of darkness, broken only by the fireplace consuming your precious wood. That is when hunger really bites. Meals become even more meager. Black bread seems heavier, denser, as if made of earth and regret. Your diet is what a modern nutritionist would call a cry for help. You long for the taste of meat, a luxury you taste perhaps twice a year on a feast day. To survive the boredom and fear, the village turns to stories. Tales of saints, of demons in the forest, of distant kings. Stories are as important as bread. They nourish something else. One day, when you are about 12, something changes. Strange men on horseback come to the village. They speak a harsh, incomprehensible language. The priest looks frightened. The Lord's overseer disappears. In his place comes a new man, wearing a metal helmet and a coat of mail. He speaks the same strange language. The old Lord, a man you feared but knew, is gone. The new Lord is a Norman, a conqueror. You don't understand politics, kings, or battles. What you do understand is this: your master has changed, but his chains are the same, only held by a different hand, a hand that feels tighter. The Mass in the church now has French words mixed with Latin. Oppression now has a foreign accent. But life, even yours, is not a bottomless pit of misery. There are glimmers of light, small, blinding, and rare. There is the feast day of the village's patron saint. Work stops. The Lord releases a barrel of beer. It is weak, but better than water. There is music, a drum, and perhaps an out-of-tune flute. People dance. For an afternoon, you forget the pain in your back. You laugh, a genuine, throaty laugh. You exchange a glance with a girl whose hair smells of smoke and wildflowers. Her name is Elspeth. Her teeth are crooked, but her smile hits you like a ray of sunshine. There is the tavern, a smoky hole that smells of spilled beer and human sweat. A place to escape the cold and your family. A crude song is sung in chorus. You spend the only coin you have, somehow manage to get on a mug of ale. It tastes bitter, but for a few minutes, you feel like a king. A king on a throne of stained wooden benches. These moments don't give you hope. Hope is a dangerous concept. They give you something more important. A reason not to lie down in a field one day and simply refuse to get up. The years pass in this rhythm. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Work, pain, a brief joy, and more work. You are no longer a boy. You are a young man of 16, perhaps 17. You do not know your exact age. You are strong. Your body is a working machine sculpted by toil. But already you feel old. There is a weariness in your bones that will not go away with the night's sleep. Your hands are no longer your own. They are tools belonging to the earth. You look at your father and see your future. You look at Elspeth and see the next step. Marriage. Not a union of hearts, but a merging of two lifelong sentences of work. A way to ensure that there will be another pair of hands to hold the plow when yours fail. And you accept it. Because that's the way things are. They always have been. And as far as you know, they always will be. You are 19, perhaps 20. Time to you is not a line of numbers, but a succession of harvests. You have completed more than a dozen full cycles of labor, and your body is a testament to that. You are a grown man. And a grown man, in this reality of yours, needs two things to be considered complete: a wife and his own plot of land to work under the Lord's permission. The two things conveniently come together. Her name, Elspeth, has become a familiar sound in your mind. The girl from the party, with the crooked smile and the eyes that seem to contain the color of the sky before a storm. You don't woo her. The concept of wooing is a fantasy sung by drunken minstrels to noblemen on their hands. What happens is much more raw and practical. It's a contract, a negotiation. Your father and her father meet outside the church after Mass. There are no smiles. There is careful consideration, like two merchants examining each other's livestock. Your father praises your strength, your ability to work from dawn to dusk without complaint. Her father nods, then mentions Elspeth's skill at weaving, at tending a vegetable garden, and, implicitly, her ability to bear children. The conversation turns to possessions. Her father has 2 cows and a small plot of extra land. You have nothing but your strength and the promise of the land your father works. The deal is sealed with a handshake that feels more like the sealing of a transaction than the joining of 2 souls. The union of the 2 of you will create a more efficient working unit. It is romantic in its brutally pragmatic way. Your wedding is not an event, it is a formality. On an autumn day after the heavy work of harvesting is done, you 2 stand before the priest. He mutters a few words in Latin that you do not understand, makes the sign of the cross, and pronounces you husband and wife. The payment for this divine service is one of your best chickens. You hand it over with a pang of pain. That chicken could have turned into many eggs. Afterwards, there is a small celebration outside your cottage. A few neighbors come. Someone plays a flute. The beer your father brewed is weak and sour, but it is drunk with pleasure. Elspeth stands by you, silent. The 2 of you are terrified. You are practically strangers, now chained to each other by the land, the church, and necessity. The wedding night is an exercise in silent humiliation. There is no private bedroom. You lie on a straw mat in the corner of the same one-room hut where your parents snore, separated from them only by a hanging cloth. The act itself is quick, awkward, and silent, driven not by desire but by the overwhelming duty to produce heirs. To produce more labor. The next step in your social advancement is to have your own home. Home is a generous word. The Lord grants you the right to occupy an abandoned hut on the edge of the village. The last family who lived there was taken by smallpox. The thatched roof is rotten and caved in. The wattle and daub walls have holes that whistle in the wind. Weeks of extra work go by after the day in the fields is over to make the place minimally habitable. You and Elspeth cut young reeds from the marsh, learning to weave them for the roof. You mix clay, dung, and straw to patch the walls. It's back-breaking work, but for once it's for something that's worth living for. Or at least yours to use until you decide otherwise. It is in this cabin that the next phase of fear begins. Elspeth is pregnant. You feel a mixture of pride and utter dread. Pride because you have done your duty. Dread because you know what the odds are. Every cough she gives in the winter, every fever, fills you with icy terror. The birth is a repeat of yours, but now you are the man outside, hearing the screams, feeling helpless. This time, a boy survives. He is small and noisy. You call him Thomas. Now you understand the look on your father's face. When Thomas cries at night, it's not just a noise, it's an alarm. A cold can turn into a deadly cough in a matter of days. A rash could be a sign of the illness that took the family from the other side of the village. Your medicine is a mixture of superstition and rumor. Elspeth hangs a clove of garlic over the makeshift crib. The old healer comes and mutters prayers, applying a paste of herbs that smells musty. The only thing you can really do is pray and wait. A year later, Elspeth gives birth to a baby girl. You name her Agnes. She is frail from the start. In her first winter, she catches a cough. The cough deepens, becomes a wet, rumbling sound that echoes through the small cottage. She burns with fever. You take turns holding her, trying to pass your own warmth to her tiny body. One night, in the silence broken only by the howling wind outside, her breathing stops. It just stops. The silence that follows is heavier than any sound you have ever heard. There are no cries of mourning. There is no time for mourning. There is only a hollow emptiness and the practical, horrible task that follows. You spend the next morning digging a small hole in the corner of the churchyard. Elspeth wraps Agnes's tiny body in a piece of her best linen. The priest says a few hurried words. Neighbors nod sympathetically. They know. Almost all of them have dug a similar hole. That night, you and Elspeth eat in silence. The next day, you return to the fields. The pain does not go away. It just settles into your bones, along with the weariness. Life goes on. You and Elspeth become a team, a survival unit. You learn to read each other's silences. Your work is a mirror. While you struggle with the earth outside, her universe is the hut and the small garden next door. She is an alchemist of scarcity. She turns cabbage, turnips, and herbs into a pottage that keeps them going. She bakes the dense, dark bread that is the basis of every meal. She spins the wool from the master's sheep and spends endless nights weaving the rough cloth that will become your tunics. Her work is invisible to the outside world, but without it, you would die. Your village is a living organism, and you learn to navigate its arteries and vital organs. There is the blacksmith, a large, sweaty man whose power seems almost magical. The sound of his anvil is one of the village's heartbeats. He fixes your plow blade when it breaks, a catastrophe that could spell your doom. He is respected, a little feared, a man who commands fire. You pay for his services with food or labor, always feeling indebted. Then there's the miller, the richest and most hated man in the village, after the overseer. Everyone needs him to grind the precious grain into flour. And everyone knows with absolute certainty that he is a thief. He has the mill, the technology, the power. He takes his fine, the portion of flour that is owed to him, but his thumb always seems to weigh in the balance. You argue, you protest, but what can you do? Take your grain somewhere else? The next mill is a day's walk away, so you swallow your resentment, along with the bread made from the flour that you know should be more. And of course, the Father. Now a grown man, you see him differently. You still fear him, for he holds the keys to heaven and hell. But you also see the man. You see him enjoying the best goose on the feast day, goose that has been given as a tithe. You hear him preach against gluttony as his belly bulges beneath his cassock. In confession, you mutter your little sins, envying your neighbor, cursing the ox, while wondering to whom the priest confesses his. Community life is a double-edged sword. In times of crisis, such as illness or fire, neighbors help each other. They share what little they have. But in everyday life, life is a web of petty rivalries and mistrust. A dispute over a boundary line between two strips of land can turn into a family feud that lasts for generations. A piece of gossip, a rumor, can ruin a reputation. One day, reality hits you square in the face. Your neighbor Godric's pig escapes and destroys part of your precious vegetable garden. You confront Godric. He shrugs. The argument heats up. Voices are raised. The dispute is taken to the Lord's overseer for justice. Court is held under an ancient oak tree. There are no lawyers. There is no jury. Just the overseer sitting on a stool looking bored. He listens to your complaint, then to Godric's. Godric, you remember, gave the overseer some cheese last week. The overseer's verdict is swift. He declares it was an accident, but that you should mend your own fence more carefully. You are the victim, but somehow you are reprimanded. You return home, the bitter taste of injustice in your mouth. It is an important lesson. Justice is not blind. It sees only too well who has the most to offer. You are now a father, a husband, a farmer, a member of this complex and claustrophobic community. You are strong, resilient, and deeply tired. You have learned to find joy in the smallest things. The warmth of the sun on your back on a rare mild day. The smile of your son Thomas. The touch of Elspeth's hand in yours in the dark. These moments are your riches, the only riches you will ever know. Your world has clear boundaries. To the north, the stream that marks the end of your Lord's land. To the south, the oak grove that no one dares to tread after dark. To the east and west, fields stretch as far as the eye can see, but your mind knows exactly where your land ends and your neighbor's begins. This is your map. A map etched into your feet and your soul. You have heard the names of other places and stories told around the fire. Places like London or even Rome, where the Pope lives. To you, these places are no more real than heaven or hell. They are just sounds, legends. The idea of traveling to a place you cannot reach on foot in a day is as absurd as the idea of flying. Travel is for people with a divine purpose, like pilgrims, with a violent purpose, like soldiers, or with a desperate purpose, like those fleeing famine. It is not for people like you, until one day it is. You need salt, not just a little, but enough for the winter salting of pork for your main household. Salt is precious, almost magical, and the nearest source is in the market town of St. Albans, 2 days' walk away. A journey, an expedition. You and 3 other men from the village, including Godric, your turnip-thieving neighbor, are chosen for the task. It is not an honor, it is an order. You are given a cart, a stubborn ox to pull it, and a few silver coins tied in a cloth, which you hold as if it were a dragon's egg. The preparation is a solemn ritual. Elspeth bakes extra bread, harder and drier than usual so that it will last. She gives you a piece of cheese and a kiss on the cheek that is quick but carries the weight of a possible goodbye. You sharpen your only knife. You pray in church, asking St. Christopher, the patron saint of travelers, not to be too busy to care for an insignificant peasant. The first part of the journey is through familiar lands. But then you enter the forest. The same forest whose edge you have patrolled all your life. Being inside it is entirely different. It is another realm. The sunlight is sliced into 1,000 pieces by the leaves, creating a perpetual, deceptive twilight. The air is heavy, damp, smelling of rotting earth and decaying life. The silence is a lie. It is filled with a million tiny sounds that your paranoid mind amplifies. A twig snaps. Is it a deer? A wolf? A bandit on the prowl? You walk in silence together, your eyes constantly moving. The forest, you know, is not empty. It harbors outlaws, mad hermits, and, according to your grandmother's stories, much worse, nameless things that do not like to be disturbed. You are not afraid of monsters. You are afraid of the real, an ambush, an injury, getting lost. Losing your way here does not just mean being late. It means death. You spend the night taking turns keeping watch, a small, nervous fire your only company. The howl of a wolf in the distance makes your blood run cold, no matter how many times you've heard it from the safety of your village. The next morning you continue on, and finally at the end of the second day, you see it. Or rather, you smell it. The smell of the city arrives long before you see it. It is not the familiar smell of dung and hay from your village. It is a concentrated, complex stench, a masterpiece of human misery. It is the smell of 1,000 unwashed bodies, of garbage rotting in piles, of sewage running into an open ditch in the middle of the street, of greasy smoke from dozens of kitchens, and the metallic smell of blood coming from the butcher's alley. It is the smell of progress, and it makes you want to vomit. Then you see it. A wall, not a wooden fence, but a stone wall, high and imposing, with a gate that looks like a giant's jaw. To you who have lived among wood and clay, it is the most impressive structure you have ever conceived. The city is an assault on every one of your senses. The noise is a deafening cacophony, a constant stream of people shouting, carts creaking, dogs barking, a blacksmith's hammer beating incessantly, a church bell, a church much larger than yours, ringing a strange rhythm. The sight is chaos incarnate. The narrow street is a river of people. You see a knight in dirty armor pushing through the crowd, arrogant and indifferent. You see a merchant in velvet whose clothes would cost more than you could earn in 10 lifetimes. You see monks, prostitutes, scarred soldiers, street children with old, quick eyes. And then you see him and stop for a moment, your heart in your throat. A leper. He sits in a corner, ringing a small bell to warn of your approach. His face is partially disfigured, a mask of melted wax. People throw coins into his bowl from a distance, with a mixture of pity and horror. The leper is a valuable public service, a reminder that no matter how bad your life is, it could be demonstrably, horribly worse. The market is the epicenter of pandemonium. Stalls sell things you can't name, exotic spices that smell like a dream world, fabrics dyed in colors so bright they hurt your eyes, knives, pots, leather belts. You meet the salt merchant, a fat, sly man who tries to cheat you out of the weight. A tense argument ensues. Godric, surprisingly, is good at it. He argues, gesticulates, curses, and you get the salt for the agreed price. You hold the heavy sacks on the cart like they're treasures. Your mission is accomplished. The only thing you want now is to get out of this horrible and wonderful place. The journey back is quicker. The fear of the forest is now overcome by the desire to return home. When you finally see the thatched roof of your village, a feeling of relief so profound that your legs almost give out. The familiar smell, the stillness, the familiar faces. This is the real world. The city was a feverish nightmare. That night, in the tavern, you are heroes. You try to describe the stone wall, the crowd, the leper. Words fail you. How do you describe a world to people who share the same tiny mental map as you? The story becomes a local legend for a few weeks, then fades into routine. The journey has changed you, but it has also chained you even more to your home. The world outside is big and full of wonders, but it is also big and full of dangers. You are content with your small, predictable patch of land. But the threat doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it grows under your own feet. 2 years after your journey, spring arrives, but the rain does not. The seeds you planted with such hope remain in the dry, cracked earth. The sun, normally your workmate, becomes a brazen enemy, burning the sky day after day. The stream dries up and becomes a bed of stones. The shoots that do appear are weak and yellow. It is a catastrophe in slow motion. The harvest is a joke, a disaster. The sheaves are thin and the grains are small and few. The master's overseer comes as usual. He sees your pathetic mounds of wheat. He shows no compassion. You need your share. The church needs your tithe. He takes their share, which this year is almost half of what you harvested. What is left is a cruel joke. It is not enough. Winter comes like a wolf. Hunger begins as a familiar dull ache and turns into a constant agony. First you eat the pig, then the chickens. The cheese and grains are gone by January. By February you are eating the rotten turnips and the bread made with more bark than flour. The children cry with hunger, a faint, constant sound. Thomas, your son, grows thin, his eyes wide and a pale face. The village, once a community of petty rivalries, is now a place of quiet despair. People avoid each other's eyes. A poisonous suspicion hangs in the air. A neighbor glances at your hut and wonders if you have a loaf of bread hidden away. Doors are locked at night. Hunger eats away not only bodies, but the bonds that held the village together. The priest organizes processions. The entire village walks through the dry fields, singing hymns, begging God for mercy. Some begin to whisper about witchcraft, blaming the old woman who lives alone at the edge of the forest. Fear has turned inward. There is no enemy to fight, only your own empty stomach and the mercilessly clear sky. You lie at night beside Elspeth, both of you thin and weak, listening to the sound of your child's empty belly. You have survived the birth, the labor, the injustice, the journey to a strange world. Now you face the oldest and most invincible enemy of all. You look up at the thatched roof in the dark, and for the first time you are not sure if you will see spring. You don't know if you're 40 or 45. Counting years is a luxury for people whose lives have distinct chapters. Your life has been one long chapter called work. But you don't need a calendar to know that you're old. Your body is your calendar, and every page is filled with notes of pain. The morning begins not with a wake-up call, but with an inventory. You sit on the edge of your straw mat and count. Your back, which now refuses to stand completely straight, sends a fiery salute. Your left knee, where an ox pinned you against a fence 20 years ago, cracks like a dry twig. Your teeth. Oh, your teeth. You have more holes in your mouth than your sieve. It's useful for drinking soup, less useful for eating bread, which you now have to dip into stew until it turns to a sad mush. Sometimes a sharp, throbbing pain settles in your jaw for days, a hellish fire that no herbal remedy or prayer can quench. Your vision, which once could spot a hawk in the sky a league away, now turns the distant trees into green blurs. You are a tool that has been used to its limit. You are wearing yourself out. The clearest evidence of your decline is on the other side of the cottage. Your son Thomas. He is now the age you were when you married Elspeth. He has your broad shoulders and the relentless strength of youth. Watching him lift a sack of grain that you can now barely carry is a complex mixture of pride and humiliation. You watch him walk out into the fields before dawn, the same stubborn energy you once had driving his steps. You, once the driving force of this family, are now a passenger. The transition is not an event. It is a series of small, painful surrenders. One day, during harvest, you can't keep up with Thomas and your other children. You fall behind, panting, the scythe weighing heavy in your hand as if it were made of lead. Thomas, without a word, finishes his row. The gesture is helpful, but it feels like a resignation. Slowly, your jobs change. You no longer plow, you no longer harvest. You become the guardian of the lighter tasks. You mend the fence with clumsy, shaky hands. You spend hours carving a new hoe handle, a job that used to take an afternoon. You care for your grandchildren, noisy, lively children, who look at you with a mixture of affection and curiosity, as if you were a strange relic of a bygone time. Your relationship with Thomas is a minefield of unspoken love and swallowed resentment. You watch him plant the seeds a little too deep and bite your tongue. You watch him try to fix the wagon wheel the wrong way, and finally you can't take it anymore. Not like that, boy, you mutter. You'll split the wood, tilt it. Thomas shoots you a quick look, irritated by the interruption. He knows you're right, which only angers him more. He does it his way, and so wood splits. The small victory brings you no joy, only weary sadness. You're passing the baton, but the process is clumsy, painful. You taught him how to survive, and now his survival depends on him. It's the cycle of life. It's fair, and it's terribly bitter. But you realize you have a new kind of value. Your strength is gone, but your memory remains. You have become the guardian. Your legacy will not be written in a book or carved in stone. Your legacy is practical knowledge whispered beside the fire on long winter nights. You become a teacher. Your grandchildren sit at your feet, their eyes wide in the dim light. You don't teach them to read. It's useless. You teach them things that matter. You take them outside and point to the sky. See that cloud? You say, your voice hoarse. The way it's breaking up at the edges? That means strong winds tomorrow. And look at the crows flying low. That means rain before nightfall. Educated men read books, we read the sky. The sky is an older and more honest book. You teach your eldest grandson how to feel the blade of a knife, to know if it is sharp enough, not just by looking. You show him how the grain of a piece of wood tells you where it will break. You show him the tracks of a badger and those of a dog, and the crucial difference between them. You teach your granddaughter which forest mushrooms are food and which are a quick and painful passage to the afterlife. You teach her the smell of herbs that calm fever and which staunch blood. This knowledge is the only inheritance you have to give. It is invisible, weightless, and more valuable than all the gold in the Lord's castle. You also become the storyteller, the village memory. The children ask for the story of how Godric, their old neighbor now bent with age, fought a wild boar. You tell the story of the great famine, turning it into an epic tale of survival, omitting paralyzing despair you actually felt. You tell the stories your grandmother told you, of the giants who sleep beneath the hills and the water spirits who live in the stream. You are the living link in a chain that stretches back into the darkness of time. As your body grows weaker, your mind turns inward to your soul. The fear of hell, which in your youth was a distant concept to frighten children, is now a pressing concern. Eternity no longer seems so long when your own end is visibly on the horizon. Church becomes more important. You no longer go out of habit, but out of desperate need. You listen to the priest's words about fire and brimstone with renewed attention. Every sin you have committed in your life, every lie, every envious thought, every outburst of anger, seems to weigh on your soul like stones. One day you decide it's time. You walk slowly to the church, your knee protesting with every step, to confess. The priest, a younger man now who never knew your father, listens to you in a dark booth that smells of wax and dust. You struggle to remember your sins. The list is pathetic and human. I coveted my neighbor's cow, Father. I swore when the plow broke. I had impure thoughts about the miller's widow 30 years ago. I lied to the overseer about a sick sheep. You pour out the dirty little collection of your moral failings. The priest murmurs absolution, gives you a penance of 10 Hail Marys. You leave the church feeling a little lighter, but absolution feels like a thin, fragile shield against the flames you imagine. You sit outside your cabin, the afternoon sun warming your old bones. You watch Thomas working in the fields, a distant, strong speck. You watch your grandchildren play, their cries echoing in the air. Elspeth, now a wrinkled and stooped matriarch, but with the same steely strength in her eyes, is weaving in the doorway. You look at your hands. They are like a map of your life. Calluses, scars, nails thick and yellowed. Hands that have planted and harvested 50 times. Hands that have built a house, held newborns, and buried the dead. You don't think, what was the point of all this? It's too big a question, too abstract. Your thinking is simpler. The work is done. The harvest is in. The family is here. Thomas is strong. What next? You look up at the sky, no longer to predict the weather, but out of habit. And for the first time, you feel like you're not just looking at the clouds. You're looking beyond them with a mixture of fear and weary curiosity. The church bell begins to toll for Vespers. The same shadow, the same sound. But now it seems to be calling you. The end comes not like a clap of thunder, but like the slow extinguishing of a candle. It comes in winter, the season that has always taken the weak. You don't have a specific disease with the name. You have the disease of having lived too long. Your body, the working machine that has sustained you through nearly 50 harvests, simply decides that it has had enough. It starts with a cough that won't go away, a cough that leaves you weak and breathless. Then food, which was already a challenge to chew, becomes impossible to swallow. You spend your days lying on your straw mat in the same corner of the hut where you were born. The cycle is closing. The world shrinks until it becomes just this smoky room. The sounds of life outside, the blacksmith's anvil, the screams of children, the lowing of a cow, reach you as if they are coming from underwater. Your death is not a private matter, it is a community event. Death, like birth and harvest, is a mainstay of village life. Elspeth, your wife, now an old woman with a face as wrinkled as a dried apple, sits beside you. She does not cry. Mourning is a luxury that will come later, if at all. Now she is practical. She moistens your lips with a wet cloth. She holds you when the chills of fever shake you. Thomas, your son, comes and goes, his face a mask of worry and duty. He looks at you, and you see in his eyes the weight of the family's future falling squarely on his shoulders. It is a look you know well. You have had it. The neighbors come to pay their respects. It is not a social visit. It is an acknowledgement. They come into the cabin, stand for a moment in the awkward silence, look at you, murmur something like, "God be with you, Edric," and leave. It is a ritual. They are saying goodbye to a part of their own history. They are looking toward their own future. The priest is summoned. He arrives smelling of incense and the wine he drank at lunch. He performs extreme unction, the last of the sacraments. He murmurs more Latin over your head, anoints your forehead with holy oil. The ritual is to prepare you for the journey, to cleanse the last remnants of sin from your soul, before you present yourself to your Maker. You can barely keep up. You feel like a boat loosed from its moorings, and the priest's voice is just the sound of the wind pushing you out to sea. The fear of hell that haunted you in your nights of wakefulness is now a distant ember, muffled by physical exhaustion. You are too tired to be afraid. There are moments of clarity. In one, you are alone with Elspeth. The dim light of the fire dances across your face. You do not speak. You do not need to. 50 years of shared life are contained in the silence between you. Your marriage, which began as a land contract, has become something else. A knot of two trees that have grown so close together that it is impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. She holds your hand. Her hand, like yours, is a map of labor and pain. It is the most comforting touch you have ever felt. Another moment, Thomas kneels beside you. You gather your remaining strength and grab his arm. His arm is hard as oak, strong. The north field. You whisper, your voice a scratch. Plant the barley there next year. The ground is tired of wheat. It's your last act as a father, your last piece of legacy. Pass on the knowledge. Thomas just nods, his eyes shining. He understands. You're not just talking about grain. Your breathing becomes shallower. The world fades into shadows and muffled sounds. You see faces, but they blend together. Your mother, your father, little Agnes, they all seem to be in the room with you. The sound of the church bell begins to toll. Maybe for Vespers, maybe just in your head. It is the sound that has ruled your entire life. Your first cry, your first day at work, your wedding, every Sunday, every festival. Now it tolls one last time. For you. And then you're gone, without a last dramatic breath, without any final words of wisdom. You simply cease to be, like a candle flame in a draft. What follows is the mechanics of oblivion. Elspeth and her daughters-in-law wash his body and wrap it in a linen shroud. Thomas and the other men of the village dig his grave in the churchyard. Having a grave in holy ground is his ultimate luxury, his only claim to permanence. The funeral mass is short. The priest commends his soul to God. His body is lowered into the cold earth. The people throw a handful of earth over the shroud, and then they go back to their lives. Life in the village barely stops. Mourning is a luxury that can only be afforded for so long. Cows need to be milked, food needs to be prepared, work needs to be done. On the night of your burial, there is a mourning in your family's hut. But the next morning, Thomas is back in the fields. He has a family to feed. He is applying the lesson you have taught him all his life. Keep going. Your name, Edric, will be mentioned for a time. Remember when Edric, the elders in the tavern will say. Your grandchildren will remember the grandfather who taught them to read the sky. But in a generation, you will be a shadow. In two, your name will be forgotten, swallowed up in the succession of new lives, new work, new deaths. There is no headstone to mark your grave. The stone is for you. Your only headstone is the land you worked, the family you raised, and the silent knowledge that flows in your child's blood. Your legacy is not the memory of who you were, but the continuation of the cycle. Another man, with your hands and your eyes, walking in the shadow of the same bell. And in the grand scheme of things, perhaps that's as close to immortality as someone like you could hope for. Your father has been dead for 5 years, but he has never left. He lives in your hands when you hold the plow, feeling the same way he did. He lives in your voice when you yell at the ox, using the same grunts and curses. And most of all, he lives like a ghost on your shoulder, a silent judge of every decision you make. This spring, you decide to plant beans in the northern field. A voice in your head, the voice of your father, Edric, immediately mutters, "Beans. This field is for barley. It always has been." You hesitate for a moment, staring at the bag of bean seeds. Times change. You whisper to no one, feeling foolish. You plant the beans. It's a small act of rebellion against a ghost, an attempt to prove that you're the master now. But as you bury the seeds, a part of you prays that your father was wrong. The weight of his legacy isn't just the wisdom he left you. It's the constant fear of disappointing him, even after he's turned to dust. You are Thomas, son of Edric. You are the head of your family. You have your wife, Isolde, a quiet, strong woman, whose hair is the color of honey. You have 2 sons and a daughter who survived infancy, a blessing you never take for granted. Your eldest son you named Edric after his grandfather. The cycle. Life is hard, predictable, a repetition of your father's years. You work the same land, under the same sky, in the shadow of the same bell. You think you know the rules of the game, so the game changes. The old Norman lord dies. His son, a young man named Sir Renaud, inherits the land. Renaud is different from his father. He was raised in Normandy, speaks French more fluently than his father's broken English, and has an ambition that burns like a fever. He doesn't just want to rule his village, he wants everyone for miles around to know that he rules. He doesn't need a manor house, he needs a castle. The news comes through the new overseer, a man with a hard face and eyes that calculate everything in terms of work and coins. There will be a new corvée. In addition to working in the Lord's fields, all able-bodied men in the village, aged 15 to 50, must work 1 month each year on the construction of the Lord's new tower. Not during the winter off-season, but during the spring and summer. A murmur of protest and fear runs through the village. You are farmers, not builders. Your hands know the earth, not the stone. Taking men out of the fields during growing season might mean a smaller harvest. It might mean famine. But the protest is silent, swallowed. The will of the Lord is the will of God, as the priest reminds them the following Sunday. Apparently, God is very interested in masonry this year, too. Your first time at the construction site is like entering another world, a hell of stone and dust. The chosen location is the top of the hill that overlooks the village, the same place from where you, as a child, watched the old Lord's son ride past on his pony. Now the hill is being transformed. Half the men are sent to the quarry a mile away. It is a gaping gash in the earth, a wound of gray rock. The work is brutally simple and dangerous. You are given a heavy hammer and a wedge. Your job is to pound the stone day after day in the sun. The air is thick with fine dust that seeps into your lungs, making you cough up gray dust at night. The noise is deafening. The constant metallic clang of hundreds of hammers, the screams of men, the sharp sound of stone breaking. Stone chips fly like arrows. Within the first week, a man from his village loses an eye. He is sent home, his working life effectively over. No one gets paid for it. He has simply been damaged. You learn a new kind of pain, the pain of muscles you didn't know you had, the pain of pulled tendons, the constant fear of a rock slipping, a hammer missing its target. This work doesn't have the rhythm of agriculture. It has no cycle, no life. It's just extraction. Brute force against the stubbornness of the earth. The other half of the men, including you next month, work at the construction site. Your job is to haul the massive stones from the base of the hill to the top. You use rough wooden sleds pulled by thick ropes over rollers of logs. It's a job for oxen, but you're cheaper. In groups of 10, you lean over, your muscles screaming, pulling the monstrous load. The foreman shouts, whipping the air. Each stone that reaches the top feels like an impossible victory. Up above, you see the real builders, the stonemasons. They are men different from you. Some are Norman, some are English, but all are skilled craftsmen. They are paid. They receive silver coins at the end of the week. They look down on you and the other peasants. You are just the mules. They shape the stones with the skill that seems like magic, transforming the rough blocks that you nearly died to transport into perfect shapes. The tower begins to rise, slow, inexorable. A structure of gray stone that looms over your huts of wood and clay. The resentment in you deepens and hardens like mortar between stones. The work in the fields, miserable as it was, had a purpose you understood. Food, survival. This work, building this monument to your own oppression, seems like senseless cruelty. You are building the walls of your own prison. You come home every night covered in stone dust instead of earth, your body aching in a new and alarming way. Isolde nurses your cuts and bruises in silence. In her eyes, you see the same fear you saw in your mother's. But there's something else, a shared anger. Your hardships aren't just against nature, they're directly imposed by a man. That somehow brings you closer together. You don't talk much, but there's an understanding. You're in this together. And in the midst of this new servitude, the cycle of life continues. Isolde bears you another child, a son. One night, while the baby sleeps, your eldest son, little Edric, approaches you. He is 7 years old, the age when your father took you to the fields. He touches a callus on your hand, a new callus formed by the stone, not the plow. "Does this hurt, father?" he asks. You look at his serious face, at his curious eyes, and in that moment, the ghost of your father sits heavily on your shoulder. You see yourself in him. You see your father in you. You promised yourself it would be different, but the world didn't give you that choice. What can you tell him? The truth? That his life will be the same pain, maybe worse? Instead, you do what your father would have done. You ruffle his hair. It's just a callus, boy, you say, your voice huskier than you intended. It shows the work's been done. It's a lie. It's armor. It's the only inheritance you know how to pass on. You stand up and walk to the door of the cabin. The night is cold. At the top of the hill, the silhouette of the unfinished stone tower cuts through the starry sky. It looks like a broken tooth in the mouth of the world. Your father fought the earth. You are fighting the earth and the stone. You look out into the darkness and wonder what new hell this world will invent for your son to fight in. The years have accumulated on your back like the stones you carried to the Lord's tower. Now you are the village elder. The tower, once a wound of scaffolding and noise, is now a silent and permanent part of the landscape. A tooth of gray stone biting into the sky, a constant reminder of who is master. Your body is a map of pains that tell the story of your life. The pain of the earth on your knees, the pain of the stone on your back. You survived. And in your world, survival is the only kind of victory there is. Your eldest son, Edric, is the man you were. Strong, quiet, competent. He runs the fields in the family with a weary efficiency that you recognize painfully. The cycle has repeated itself. The plow has been passed, the lessons have been taught. The weight of the legacy has been transferred. You watch your grandson, Little John, running through the fields to scare the birds, and you see yourself and your father before you. The wheel of time turns, but it always seems to come back to the same place. But there was another seed in his field, his second son, William. From childhood, he had been different. Where Edric had the strength to plow, William had the cunning in his hands. His hands were not made for hard work, they were made for creating. With a knife, he could turn a twig into a bird, a block of wood into a perfectly smooth spoon. At first, this worried you. Skill with a knife did not sow a field or harvest wheat. It was a useless, dangerous talent. The revelation came one autumn day when the axle of the wagon broke under the weight of the harvest. A catastrophe. Edric, in his fury and strength, tried to force a new axle, nearly breaking it. You screamed in frustration. It was William, then 14, who approached you silently. He picked up the broken axle, examined it, took out his knife, and with a patience that seemed otherworldly, began to carve a new axle from an oak log. He did not use force. He followed the grain of the wood, feeling it, coaxing it. The axle he produced fit perfectly. The wagon was saved. That day you looked at your second son and saw not a weak farmer, but a different kind of strength. A strength you did not understand, but suddenly respected. The opportunity, when it came, was a serendipitous one. A master carpenter from the town of St. Albans had been hired by the master to build new stables. The carpenter, a man named Gilbert, was a being from another universe. He was paid in coin, used tools of shining iron, and spoke with an authority that came not from strength, but from knowledge. William shadowed him, watching every cut, every joint, his eyes taking in everything. Gilbert, a stern but not cruel man, noticed the boy. He saw the little animals William was carving and, in a rare moment of generosity, grunted. The boy has the gift. He could be an apprentice. Those words lodged in your mind like a splinter, an apprentice, a craftsman, a life outside the mud and the tyranny of the seasons, a life beyond the reach of the overseer, a life free. The idea was so revolutionary, so terrifying, that you hardly dared consider it. It would mean breaking the cycle. That night, you discussed the matter with Isolde. The conversation was in tense whispers in the darkness of the cottage. The cost was almost unthinkable. First, the Lord's permission. To release a serf from his feudal duties, Sir Renaud demanded a fee, a tax for the loss of a man's labor. The sum was exorbitant, equivalent to 3 years of surplus crops, if there was any. Second, the master carpenter also demanded a fee to take on an apprentice to cover his livelihood for 7 years. Together, the costs were a mountain. There was only one way. You would have to sell the ox. The ox, the engine of your farm, your most valuable asset after the land itself. Selling the ox would mean that you, now an old man, and your son Edric would have to pull the plow yourselves next spring. It would mean a life of even more inhuman labor for one, in exchange for the chance from one different life to another. It was an insane gamble. His father Edric would have called him mad. The land is everything, he would say. The ox serves the land. But you were not their father. You had seen the stone tower rise. You had felt the dust of the quarry in your lungs. You knew that the earth was not the only thing in the world, and you did not want your children to know only the prison that you had known. The decision was made. Selling the ox was like selling a part of your own soul. The meeting with the overseer to pay the fee was humiliating. The exchange of your few silver coins for your son's freedom. Then came the journey, the 2-day walk to St. George's. William was silent, his face a mixture of terror and excitement you had never felt in your life. You found Gilbert's workshop, a noisy place that smelled of sawdust and glue. Your goodbyes were awkward. You didn't hug him. You men didn't do that. You put your hand on his shoulder, squeezed it tightly, and said, "Work hard. Don't embarrass us." Those were the closest words to "I love you" you could muster. You turned and walked away without looking back, leaving your son at the gates of a new world. As you walked out of the city, you felt hollow, impoverished, terrified. But for the first time, beneath the fear, there was something else. A fragile, strange feeling that you barely recognized. It was hope. The next few years were the hardest of your lives. You and Edric struggled with the plow, your bodies screaming in protest. The harvest failed, but you survived. Now you are truly old. A grandfather often sits in the sun, watching the world go on. Edric and his sons work the fields, the cycle, the wheel. It seems like nothing has changed, but it changed. Once a year in the fall after the harvest, William comes home. He is no longer a boy, he is a man, a carpenter. He wears leather boots without holes. He brings gifts, a smooth wooden spoon for his mother, a small toy horse for his nephew. He speaks differently with words he learned in the city. He is still her son, but now he belongs to 2 worlds. You sit with him outside the hut, in the same place where your father once sat. You look up at the stone tower on the hilltop, the unchanging symbol of the Lord's power, the memory of his servitude. You look at your hands, misshapen by the dirt and stone. Your father's life was about teaching you how to endure imprisonment. You realize that your life, in the end, was about something else. It was about finding a small chink in the wall of that prison, and with the sacrifice of everything you had, pushing a sun through. The church bell tolls for Vespers, the same eternal sound. But today it sounds different to you. The cycle has not been broken. The wheel still turns. But a small piece has come off its axis and is rolling in a new direction. And in the silence of your long, weary life, you understand that this small, fragile, almost impossible change is a victory as great, as resounding as any castle on any hill. And so the bell falls silent. Our journey began with a cry from the mud in a world ruled by fear, hunger, and repetition. We followed Edric, a man whose life was defined by the limits of the land and the acceptance of his destiny. And then we saw his son, Thomas, inherit that same world, but who, through a silent and monumental sacrifice, managed to create a small chink in the wall that had imprisoned his family for generations. Their story is not about kings or battles or the building of empires. It is about something far more fundamental. It is about the vast, anonymous foundation on which all our history is built. For every name we remember in books, there are a billion Edrics and Thomases whose lives of ceaseless work made it all possible. Their pains, their fears, and their rare, explosive joys are the very fabric of human experience. They remind us that progress is not just a grand invention or a noisy revolution. Sometimes progress is a father selling his only ox. Sometimes the greatest legacy you can leave is not a stone castle, but the chance for a child to build something different for himself. Thank you so much for accompanying me on this long journey. Thank you for sitting with me around the fire, for feeling the cold of winter, and for walking through the muddy streets of a world that no longer exists but lives in our bones. I would love to know what you think. Leave a comment. What for you is a true legacy? What do we today leave for future generations? If you enjoyed this saga and want to see more deep dives like this, you know what to do. Like it, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. That's all for now. Take care, and until next time.